We need to cancel culture. A liberal society depends on the free and open exchange of ideas. Self-righteous and self-appointed police of public morality scour the internet looking for pretexts to bully, fire and hound people with differing views from public life. Daring to think out loud means daring to offend, and even daring to be wrong. But cancel culture offers no redemption. It accepts no apologies. Cancel culture stifles debate, kills humour and narrows minds. It's got to go.
And Madeleine joins us to debate her arguments with Dr Anastacia Ryan, who's a lecturer in social and public policy at Glasgow University. Thank you both very much indeed for joining us. So, Madeleine, how big a problem is cancel culture and how does it work in practice?
I think it's a very big problem. I think it's widespread. It's happening in America where I live and it's happening here in the UK. I think it works in two main ways. The first is the persecution of one's political opponents or those with differing views in the place of where we would have traditionally have seen debates and challenge and disagreement, all proper functions of a liberal society. And the second function of cancel culture is the lack of forgiveness and the condemnation of people who do make mistakes, who do say things that they later regret. And that would be in the place of a spirit of generosity and a spirit of forgiveness, which again, liberalism depends on.
Anastacia, do you recognise this description of a society that's stifling debate through cancel culture?
Not at all. Within a liberal society, yes, we have a right to free speech, but with every right that we have a responsibility. So our right to freedom of expression of opinion is also coupled with our responsibility to do no harm. Where somebody is effectively being cancelled, and I actually take issue with the term in and of itself, where somebody's been cancelled is often, most usually because they have said something that is derogatory, it's misogynistic, it is racist, it's transphobic. And what the marginalised communities that are doing in effectively cancelling them is calling them out, is holding them to account for expressing often dangerous, oppressive views against already oppressed, marginalised communities.
Madeleine, what's your response to that? It's not cancelling people, it's calling them out on when they're saying something that they shouldn't be saying.
So these are all subjective terms. And I think that what's really going on here is we're seeing a conflation between being offended and feeling offended and people perceiving their rights to have been violated. Actual fact, I find that cancel culture, it's often the people whose rights are being violated, or often the people who are being accused of being transphobic, being racist. For example, Maya Verstater was fired for holding views, gender-critical views, which were deemed to be protected under the Equality Act. Kathleen Stock holds very mainstream feminist views, gender-critical views. She was harassed at the University of Sussex. Bullying and harassment, these are actions that we see from people who are advocating for cancel culture.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time it does look like bullying and harassment. I mean, Madeleine's just given the examples there of what's happened to women who are just saying what they believe.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, that is often what's used to weaponise against marginalised and excluded communities who are holding people to account for expressing these opinions that are creating harm. For example, J.K. Rowling, in her expression of gender-critical views, what she was effectively doing was excluding trans people from mainstream feminism and saying that trans women were not women. You know, as a cis woman, I have no issue with extending the vindication or the advocacy for the vindication of my rights to trans women. And what people like J.K. Rowling are doing is using their powerful platform, their influence, their privilege to punch down rather than punching up. Well, and that's what they should be doing.
J.K. Rowling isn't here to defend herself, but what did you make of the J.K. Rowling example?
I think what J.K. Rowling said was well within the mainstream. She was very careful and diplomatic. She said she did believe in human rights for transgender people, would be willing to march for those rights, but also believes in sex-based rights for women. And there's lots of women who feel that way, and they should be able to participate in a live political debate about issues that affect their rights. I think the difference between myself and Anastacia is I think she seems to believe in a right not to be offended. I don't believe in a right not to be offended. No, it's not that I believe in a right not to be offended. It's that I believe that we have a responsibility in expressing opinions that are also not violating the rights of others. And in the case of gender-critical feminism, people are not just talking about sexual
sex-based rights. You know, J.K. Rowling had an opportunity there with her own experience of being a single mother, women's rights advocate, very powerful, influential woman. Young women look up to her. She could have been using that platform to talk about things like the impact of the cost of living rising and the impact of that on single mothers, about gender-based violence, domestic abuse, but instead she's using her platform to further discriminate and to make the lives of people who are living lives that are already hard even harder.
Do you know, it strikes me as ironic because we're sitting here in the year 2022 in the birthplace of the Scottish Enlightenment. In the 18th and 19th century, we saw massive pushback from great thinkers to religious orthodoxy, moral orthodoxy enforced on all people, which was obviously not progressive. And here we are having the same debate. We have a new moral orthodoxy which is being forced on people. Who are we to say what J.K. Rowling should think, what J.K. Rowling should be saying? J.K. Rowling is a very smart woman. She's a principled woman. She does a lot of good, and her views are entirely within the mainstream.
And also, does the idea of cancel culture, does it not make people afraid to say what they really believe? Does it not stifle debate, and is that not a bad thing?
I believe that the term cancel culture has been used by those on the right, weaponising against dissent, against
Forget about the use of the word cancel then. Does it not make people afraid to say what they really believe?
I believe that if people are genuinely, authentically concerned about not harming others, then they will say these things, they'll be called out, held to account, and they will genuinely apologise for that, and then they will go further, they will act towards contrition, they will genuinely try and engage with marginalised groups, work out what the issue was, and use their platforms for good.
I mean, Madeleine, do you think people should be allowed to say whatever they want? I mean, what are the limits?
So the limits were well summarised by a High Court judge in relation to the Maya Verstater case, which was won on appeal. And he made clear that there are a diverse range of views and worthy of respect in a democratic society. We draw the line somewhere when we're talking about social sanctions, and the obvious place to draw the line is when you're actively destroying the rights of other people. And the example he gave was Nazism and totalitarianism. Now, are you honestly suggesting that a defence of sex-based rights is akin to Nazism?
I am not.
We could discuss this for much longer. It's a fascinating discussion. We will have to leave it there, but thank you both so much for joining us this evening. Thank you.